Hi, how are you? Welcome to Tampon Talk with Mary. Welcome to the show that only airs once a month. Damn, we're I'm kind of like normally left with, I'm going right into the topic, I'm going right into the episode, but god damn, like these are really crazy times. I I feel like I'm this person where I just have to, keep going no matter what because the end goal matters more than anything else. And just that the optimism and hope of, this is who I could be one day has been, pushing me through like all kinds of crap through my life. And it's, what's resulted on that is that I've, done a ton of stuff, a lot of times all at one time. And I'm overworked and I'm stressed, and this happens a lot. There was I've gotten better about it, but there was a point in my life where I was just having like breakdown after breakdown, like, 3 in a week or whatever. And it's just like, that's not normal. But I feel like I have this constant, I don't know, stress on me where I definitely put it on myself, but it's like if you don't do everything to further yourself today, you are a failure and you are going to risk having to pack it up and go home. And I operate and I live under that stress and that fear all the time. And when you're dealing with a pandemic where I feel like there naturally is so many things outside of my control, that, you just feel like, oh, I got this, like there's always something to go to. And this is the first time in my life where I'm like, fuck, I don't have anything. You know what I mean? Like I line up all these different things for myself where I'm like, oh, at least I have this, or at least I have this. They're all gone. But the one thing that has always remained for me, and I feel like, that's taken a backseat because of, life and things getting crazy and, stuff going on, has been this show. But Tampon Talk brings me so much joy. And for something that started so simple, that wasn't even a podcast format, that, I've been doing for a while, that, serves as like, here's a profile of, my comedic talent or improv talent or, whatever. But it's also just this platform for people that don't have a voice to talk about a serious, you can hear my cat. I'm like sitting in my closet. But, this platform that serves to uplift and bring awareness to a topic that is heavily, heavily stigmatized and has been for a long time and still is. And I feel like Tampon Talk is something I can always come home to, and something that's in my control and something I can do, So I really have like leaned on it as of late. But the other thing of it too is that there's so much going on that's out of my control too, even within the prospects of the show of like, getting an interview right now, has, it's got its challenges, but, then again, there's been challenges, before a pandemic, so what else is new? But I was like, what's within my control, of me staying healthy at home that I can do that's, creative, productive, and progressive. So I really just, this time has given me a lot of time to reflect. It's given me a lot of time to reflect on, just where I was, who I am still at my core, and then, who I am now. Tampon Talk has done a great job of, putting in time, who I was and who I am now. It's quite literally over 3 years of my life, because before it was a podcast, I was doing it on a streaming platform in 2016, and like, we're in 2020 and I've been doing it that long. And there's not a lot of things that you can do in your life that have lasted that long, So I I wanted to try to do this episode to just like, every moment on Tampa Talk is my favorite moment, but just a couple of highlights of just stuff I've done. So I pulled it up, and let me go here. The first episode I ever did. Who else are you gonna get to do this with you other than immediate family? Like, people, arguably, the handful of people in your life that don't have a choice. And she was the first one. So, yes, she was. Oh my god, I'm just trying to remember. So that was that the first episode? I don't know. You know what? I might be mixing up. No, maybe this is just Spotify. Sorry, I'm trying to do it through the streaming platform. But I remember just the first episode, either on SoundCloud or, on the major streaming websites, to be first my episode. Spotify doesn't have it. That's so funny. The episode I did with my sister, where it was just super simple. We just took Mad Libs and did like a period theme, and there's a lot of great comedy that comes out of that. And I don't know why I dropped it. I think it'd be more fun to keep it back, but just the where are you aspect, where we were in Bristol, Alaska, because that's Sarah Palin's daughter with the lake name. So that was super fun. The other episode I brought on my other sister, Noelle, who I love dear, and she is an art therapy major, so she's super smart. And we just wanted to talk about like how periods have like manifested themselves in the fine arts medium, and that was so cool. And just the other conversation in the arts community about the trans community and how that like how periods are expressed through that, and as someone who is, well, one, not trans, and just like a straight female, like, you're not thinking about it, but how that transition and that this specific thing is so difficult for that community, and for a lot of, especially like current aspects of feminism, to ostracize those people. It was like, I think some of the first time where I brought it was my younger sister is very smart and in a lot of aspects smarter than me, but I think that was the first time I sat and I was like, I'm gonna bring on a lot of people that know a lot more than me. And I am so excited for that. Tampon Talk is gonna be a place to learn and an excuse to meet people. And then, oh my god, this was like my goodness, this was the first big interview I think I had, who someone, was outside of my family or friends. And it was with Chelsea Yvonne Chaz from Happy Period. And there were so many, like, I was doing it remotely, and I was doing it in my, my house in college, and like, it just, I wanted all the execution to go so well, and there was so much that I learned from this, where I am doing a lot of this myself. I'm editing, I'm doing the mics and all this stuff. I'm not smart. I don't know how to do it. So this episode gave me like so much perspective, just on like, because I was trying to figure out like what was the best way to do this remotely, because she's in Palmsdale and I was in San Diego, and I was like, I didn't have a car at the time.
Topic, it really hurts a lot of us in the long run, especially people, leaders, women, girls who live in impoverished areas, and and they have all of these cultural traditions and practices that are very common, where they are stigmatized and shunned and traumatized from having a period. Just and that's, of course, that's not our choice. We didn't choose to. Well, from my memory, my recollection as a child or in my mom's womb, I didn't say, "Hey, make me a female."
Yeah, and she's a cool lady. And just the audio quality wasn't at where I wanted it to be, but I think the message really got across, and that was like a big, big deal. And then I was like, oh shoot, I gotta get social media, I gotta do all this stuff, and like, because I think that this could do really well. And then something that I had learned from this too is that, the African American community affected by the period stigma. And she just was like, she's been a voice and an advocate for, well, and was the first person I really think for me to bring awareness to the layering of stigmas. So she helps a lot of the homeless community here in LA, and, you know, just across California through her nonprofit. And just the story of it being, you know, started with her and her mother, and like, you know, it being this real like femme experience is awesome. But then that there's something that's a stigma, right? Like something that affects anybody that has a period. And then on top of that is another stigma where, you know, like the African American community and, you know, the racial prejudice that they face all of the time. And then on top of that, being a homeless person and like, you know, that not being able to take care of your period is a slaughter to your human rights. You know, like it's a dignity thing. So you have all these like stigmas that you have to break through, where even just the first one of initially just fucking talking about periods is hard for people. So to first break through that threshold to have, you know, the other two to deal with is a really hard thing to do. So her work is commendable. And she's really great. So you should definitely like follow her and all her stuff. But that was definitely a major highlight. Kind of just scrolling through too. The first episode that I just did with, at the time, my boyfriend, who is now my fiance, that was when I was like, oh my God, this is like really serious. You know what I mean? Like, and I had realized, I was like, God, I just like, I fell in love with him like right away. That's so bad. You know, like, cause you in those first few weeks or months or whatever, dating somebody, you just have to, you know, have these guards on, cause you're slowly revealing yourself to this person. And I remember maybe like either in the first month or 2 months of us dating, I was already sharing music, and that's so, like, I'm so protective of that because I'm associating the music with the memory of the music with the person. So to, you know, be like, hey, here's a playlist that I made and here's, you know, bands that I like. And here's these songs in this order. I want you to hear them and I want to share that with you is so vulnerable for me. You know, I feel like most people use that as like, to get to know somebody, but I'm risking, you know, never being able to listen to this song again, you know, if shit hits the fan and we break up. But my God, I don't know where my life would have been, you know, even up till now without him. Is that cheesy? Is that cheesy to say? I'm gonna start crying. We like, there's people that came before him that I feel like just, I didn't know what respect for myself and dignity for myself looked like, I think, until being with him, because there were things that I've grown to accept of, you know, I have to give up who I am to compromise for this person, which, you know, sounds like, you know, duh, but when you're putting it in practicality of like, you know, balancing, I really like this person and am I too much, you know? And I never felt like once that I had to compromise my personality or my dreams or who I am for him, which I had to do before. And I was like, fuck, like this is what it's supposed to feel like. And now that's the rest of our life. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, but just that being able to share music with him, I remember being like, was a big deal, and like, you know, really wanting to get close to my family right away. And then this, you know, it was weird. Like I brought him on Tampon Talk while we were friends, in its infancy, like when it was a video streaming format, and he was the one that was like, you should make it a podcast. It wasn't me, it was him. So you could thank him for that. And he majored in production, and I'm an actor, so I've been able to learn a lot from him, to make this better. So a lot of good things that came with that. But we did this episode together, and we both, like, I'm a lot of times in front of the camera or the mic, and he's, behind the scenes, just because of anxieties, or, it's just, he's very much an introvert, and that's how he is. For him to kind of get past his anxieties and fears to come on something very public, and something very listened to by both of our families, was extremely scary. So the first time we did that, it was like, for me, it felt like a step in our relationship, just because of how, I just what this what Tampa Talk means to me. But the other thing of it too is that I didn't just.
What's good, Tampa Talk?
I love. Let me find it.
I'm gonna ask Mary a bunch of would you rather questions, but not like we're teenage girls, like we're adults who don't have brains good.
Excuse me. You don't want to go back and forth, or?
I mean, do you have some that you thought of? No. Okay.
Oh.
Wait.
All right.
Just the whole dynamic of us on this episode, we're not like traditionally romantic, and I feel like that comes with being grown, you know what I mean? Like, sure, there's all these like little gestures and like I love flowers and all this stuff. He did that, like, while we're at the beginning of our dating and the honeymoon phase, and now we came out of that and learning, we're loving each other underneath that honeymoon surface. And a lot of our love is expressed in picking on each other, which is something I do with my siblings. It's something I do with people that are closest to me, where I feel like I can, poke a stab at you and you can poke one at me, and, we still love each other at the end of the day. A lot of this episode was like that, and I kept getting just messages for, not making it sound like it was a lot, but people who were in my sphere, so like people who lived with me or something, or people that, they knew. I specifically remember my roommate, Lana's sister, asking her if Preston and I were okay, and if it sounded like that I was in an abusive relationship. And I was like, oh no, the way we come across to people is like, that he's mean to me. But it's funny. Like, I don't. And that's something that we're still dealing with. And I'm like, at this point I don't even care, because a lot of the people we were around have their own expectations of what they think like love should be, and what's important is that Preston and I have our own, and we're good at the end of the day. And I'm happy with that. And I just that was something that when that came out, everybody was like, oh my God, poor Mary, she's a helpless victim who can't say no. And it's like, no, that's not the case. Like, no one loves me more than this human being. Nobody. No one knows me more than, this person. And like, vice versa. Like, but oh my gosh, the accusations since we've been dating that have been flying back and forth of like, he's a terrible person, and you need to get him and all this stuff, and it's like, no. And there's only so much of where, I was hearing a lot of that at the beginning of my relationship, and I was like, well, yeah, I think we're in a throwaway culture where there's this person that if you don't get along on maybe like a few things, it's like, bye. And it's like, no, like, I feel like I've dealt with so much like trauma or like crap in my life where you get a lot of perspective on what truly is like a deal breaker, like I said at the beginning of our relationship, I was like, acting comes before you. And like my ambitions and my careers come before you. And I will not compromise on them at all. And, I want you to know that that's something that's never off the table. And he was like, yeah, I fully support you. And since then, behind the scenes supporting me, or like doing my reel or all this stuff, like, has been supporting me in my career. So for you to like throw that out there, to be like, you come second to this, and for them to just, either they've accepted that and then they become a part of that, is so freeing, which I didn't have before. Oh my God. I love him. I do. And I want everyone else to too, and we're growing together, and relationships aren't meant to be perfect. And it seems like, everybody that I've known, when you see them have this like picture perfect relationship in public all the time, fight a lot at home, and I feel like we've got a really good balance of that in public and at home, but you fight with the people that you love, because you want to, I'm not gonna lie to him, I'm not gonna be, and he's not gonna lie to me, so having to deal with that discomfort leads to like tiffs and fights, and that's the nature of it, but you become so much better at the end of it. And I feel like that's something I get out of fruitful friendships as well. So he's my best friend and I love him, and that was like a big deal for him to come on and be a part of this in my life. And he still is. So I think being engaged to him, I think I'll keep him. Wow. Yeah, I really love Preston. Anyway, some other things. Hi, Odin. Do you hear this? He's ridiculous. We got a cat together. You only do that with people you love. A couple of things I'm like going through, just some great stuff I've done with friends of just commentary where, I'm friends with other comics. And my friend Tom, who has a podcast, which you should check out. He talks film and stuff. And like my friend Sarah, who is soon to come on this podcast. And Sarah's podcast is in the works, so that's coming. And then a buddy of mine, Nick Jones, like, I haven't talked to him in a minute, but I have this memory with him of just, talking about this article that we found that someone wrote that like men prefer debt-free virgins without tattoos, and it was just some ridiculous article written by this like hetero macho man being like, women shouldn't go to college and get tattoos so they could be housewives, and just, there's a lot of comedy in that, Juicebox. Loved that episode. That was the first one where I got a promotion code. That was like a big deal, where I was like, oh my God, I'm real deal. But it's a sex advice app, and a lot of it is also tailored for LGBT people, and that was like the coolest thing ever.
We treat these aspects of our lives kind of as trial and error. And when you have trial and error, there's room for a lot of bad or traumatic experiences that can happen. So I really am just trying to get people comfortable talking about these topics and give people the knowledge and skills that they deserve to be able to navigate this aspect of their life.
Brienne did that, and I love her. That was a wonderful, wonderful episode. The episode where I brought on my mom. Oh my God. I had so much anxiety around it.
In your own way, I guess.
I think probably like Noelle being my first girl, you're not sure when you do it for the first time. You want to make sure, that you're telling your daughter everything she needs to know, and you don't want her to be embarrassed, and you don't want her to, you want her to be able to ask you if you have questions, and I just remember, like, not only with my daughters, but even with some of my younger cousins, I wanted to make sure when they all got their periods, like if any of them were talking to me about it, that they all knew how to use a tampon. That was one thing I remember. I was like, and you know how to do this, right? And this is how it works, because I remember my experience thinking, I don't want anybody to go through that.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, like with Noelle, I probably made mistakes that I wish, or I talked to her differently or did it better. I'm the kind of mother, it's like I think about my kids every day, and I think in the past, and I think, oh, I wish I did that better for them, or I wish I talked to them more, I wish I held their hand longer, or whatever.
Because I was like, if she hears any of the other episodes, she's just gonna be like, you're an awful daughter. You know what I mean? But it was so, and I was worried that, like, she wasn't going to be able to, fill the space because, we can have hour-long conversations and talk, but she did a good job. And my dad came in the room while we were recording, so I got both my parents in there. I feel like so much of my life is an open book. So it was cool to be like, here are my siblings, and, when I brought my brother and his boyfriend on, here they are, and here are my parents, just that I have nothing to hide, because, I think there's a lot of fear in trying to, hide these things, but, that's why, with Preston, I have nothing to hide. So and, with the world and our relationship, I have nothing to hide, because people can learn and benefit. So, especially with my mom, where, like, I was able to say, you didn't really teach me very much. And she's like, it's because my mom didn't teach me very much. And, we've never sat down and had that conversation. And she apologized. And that was a big thing for me. And, my two sisters to have that, and it's funny because if there's an episode that's explicit too, I'll tell her not to listen to it. And she listens to me. I'm like, oh, okay. But that was something where people kind of understood where I came from and, understand why I did certain things the way I did because they listened to my mom. And that there was so much love that kind of came out of the end of it. But that was a big deal. Just, kind of the same as bringing someone who ended up being my fiance on the show. And Molly. Molly was from The Real Sex Talk, and Molly is my hero. I love, love, love Molly. Molly's younger than me. But Molly is a go-getter, and she started this comprehensible platform, The Real Sex Talk, where, it was just for her and her friends starting out, where it was just sex education.
I wasn't uncomfortable talking about those topics. I just really rather be hanging out with my friends. But when I sat through that program, how important sexual education was and how much more informed I was than my peers. So throughout middle school and throughout the beginning of high school, I really noticed that disparity, and I saw the gap between me and my peers widen as we got older, because we at my school don't have sexual education until 11th grade, which is your junior year. So I had a sexual education class in 5th grade and in 8th grade, and I felt like I knew everything at this point. I had learned about sexuality and contraceptives and all these really important topics, like even consent too. But my peers were just so far behind and didn't feel comfortable talking about those topics, didn't have any confidence when it came to sexual relationships. So I realized that we really needed to do something about it.
And for it to come from your peers is like so effective. And she started this website where she was writing articles, and like her Instagram, and just, this girl had my role model. It's like her, Greta Gerwig, and Malala. Like, I was like, I love young girls getting it. So she was super cool, and I loved doing that episode. Oh my God, just the year of 2018 into 2019, so many great episodes. Like, the one right behind it was Jubilance and Alan. Alan is my favorite superhero in the Tampa Talk universe. You know what I mean? Like a cute, like, picture this for a moment. It's an old, straight, white man who cares about periods. Where are you going to find one of them? They are rare. They are rare beings.
I think your listeners are now lucky because there's a product that we've identified that was completely for another reason, increasing lifespan and increasing health span. And now we're repurposing that same product that, has been on the market for 10 years and it's got 5 million doses out there. But now we're looking at using it just for women's emotional needs right before their period. And so we decided to focus on that and do the clinical trial work to see, if this is just anecdotal stories, or is this hard science that we can show these improvements? And it turns out it's hard science.
He was and he's just so nice. And I love that family that's behind it, the Cash family. And I literally, guys, I asked this man if he had an embarrassing boner story he wanted to share. I did that for you, bitch. I did it for you. Oh my God. This nice, wholesome man. I brought my friend Ben along. Ben Siemens has been on the show only recently. At the beginning at the beginning of starting this, this idiot wanted a political career. I love him to death, but there was no way that was gonna happen. And so he was like, I can't, be on anything controversial. And then now recently he came on the show, and I love Ben. What a darling. That he came with me when I went to do this interview. This was the first time I went to the person. So up until now, everyone has just called me. So I have been this mysterious voice trying to bring them on the show. I realized it was very weird, and only until recently did I realize that. But Jubilance it's this PMS supplement. I love the Cash family. They're based in San Diego, and then their daughter that does their social media and actually reached out to me is in New York. So she's a director in New York and is doing creative things too. Lovely family. Love Jubilance. They are, just Alan coming out with the science around PMS, and it just happened on an accident in a scientific clinical trial, and he tested the theories on himself, and then he brought on Molly too, which I love this episode because I think it shows that there is no excuse for age or race or gender to not be talking about periods at all. It's something where I feel like that's the easiest cop-out, where it's like, well, I'm not a woman, so it's not my problem. Or, I'm too old and I can't learn, which is not the case. Alan was the perfect example for that. And I loved doing this interview. We still keep in touch. It's been 2 years now. And they are just darling. And what was funny too is that my director for a lot of my plays, and my college professor, Angie Bitsko, who I also later brought on the show, knows the family because she's been in San Diego for 17 years or whatever. Probably longer than that. I have to remember what she said. But she knew them. So I was like, this was meant to happen, But lovely episode. I might just go back and listen to Alan again. He's my favorite. So cute. And the episode right above it was when I brought on Steph Garcia from the Ruby, which is so funny because so in college, right, is that right before I graduated, they want you to do, the college is based in San Diego, and it's a media school, so they want you to do an internship in your field or whatever. And in 2018, I interviewed Steph Garcia because I had been following the transition of the Nerd Melt comedy showroom into the Ruby LA. So the space on Sunset Boulevard that was a comedy store in the back and a comic book store in the front. While it was still on Sunset, Comedy Central bought a show that was out of that comedy room, which had Kumail Nanjiani and Jonah Ray, and then they brought in all these other comics to do sets in the back. And I knew about the Nerd Melt because okay, you know how you have your phases in middle school or whatever. I had none of the normal ones. None. I had straight up a whose line is it anyway phase. No one has that. Only a handful of people do, and I was one of them. But through that, I was probably 5th or 6th grade, and Jeff Davis was one of the improvisers that was on that show, and he was this younger guy, and then I was like, oh, what does he do besides this? And he's best buds with Dan Harmon, who does Community and now does Rick and Morty, and and he at the time was I don't think he was just dating her for a long time, and then they got married, and I think a month after they got married they got a divorce. But Aaron McGaffey, who is this awesome improvisational comic who had a podcast called This Feels Terrible, and then Dan Harmon had Harmontown, which was this live show that he did with Jeff and Aaron, and all these other comics that they bring on that they were friends with, and a couple people from Adult Swim, and I was like, I love this show. And for a long time they were playing Dungeons and Dragons on the show, and I love that game now. I'm in a campaign currently, but that was like a big thing. And they performed a lot at the Nerd Melt Show Room, so I followed their account, and I loved all the comedians coming out of there. And then I was probably in high school, like freshman year, sophomore year, or whatever, when the theater was talking about moving or whatever, and then they were like, oh, here's the Ruby, which is like a feminist comedy theater. And it's not like they were like all encompassing together, but they assumed the space. So that's how I figured out what the Ruby was. And I was like, feminist comedy theater, I'm a feminist, I'm a comedian, can I please? So I've just been following the theater from this transition, and like it's so it's December of 2018. And I reached out on their socials, and I was like, I have a podcast, I do this. I've been, following the transition from, Nerdist to Ruby, and I'm nobody, right? Like I had only seen this from, my home in Maryland to like coming to college now and still following these, things in the comedy world. And they were like, yeah. So I brought on Steph, who is a board member of the theater, who I had been, in contact with. And we just talked about the theater's mission and things that they were doing differently. And I love it. It's like they want to offer a platform for comedians that have either been ostracized, made fun of, or didn't have a platform before. So coming back to, we're in 2018, now come to early spring 2019. The school offers this LA Quarter internship, so it's an internship where you're put in housing in LA through the school, but you complete your classes online, and then you also are part of this internship. And everybody that I was with was like really at first struggling to get an internship, and I was like, ooh. So the Ruby offers internships for operating their comedy shows, and I reached out to them, and I reached out to their operations manager, and I was like, oh hey, I know Steph I'm from Tampa Talk. I did this a while ago, and they were like, oh yeah, hey. So I drove up to the theater, and like they're like, oh yeah, we want to if you want to see you, come down for an interview. And I was like, okay. So I got there, and they just told me where everything was. And where the keys were, and what they did to clean the bathrooms, and how roles were distributed. So like from house manager to box office to tech. And I was like, oh, okay. And he was like, yeah, so just send me your availability, and then we'll get you on there. And I was like, it's very, very rare in my life where I had gotten the job right after the interview. And at this point, I was on my second streak of that. So I left with the job, and I was the first person out of everybody. Like, we had 10 weeks to find the internship before the quarter started, and I got it within the first week before everybody. And they were like, how did you make this internship? And what's so funny about it is that I talked about what it was, and the coordinator of it, like the professor that was running it, like, loved it, but she knew nothing about it. Because the school that I went to, like, I was dealing with a lot of like conservative people and religious people, and for me to be like, hey, I'm at an LGBT feminist comedy theater, that's my internship, for her to be like, that's dope, I was like, fucking we rolling, you know what I mean? And I have loved the time that I spent at the Ruby, really through it, because I have it's like before all the pandemic stuff, is that I was doing stuff with the Ruby after I graduated, just to help them out or whatever. And recently I had to take a step back and say, this is not my time right now, maybe I'll come back, and the president, or one of the co-directors of the theater, was like, so nice and understanding, and said, that if you want to come back, there'll be a paid position for you when you come back. So like, that was awesome. I don't regret any of the time I really spent it at the theater. I got so much experience, and like to work at a comedy club in LA, when you're young, is dope. And I had the coolest internship, I think. That's not true. There are a lot of people that had, cool internships, but my internship was one that only worked on the weekend. So during the week, I was able to do my classes, and then I got a job, so I could ensure that I had the financial income to move up to LA. So I feel like I played all my cards really, really well. And then I got to, start doing my TV work while I was working this internship. So I'd work comedy shows every weekend. And there are a lot of people that I got to interact with at the theater. Chris Redd, who's on the current cast of Saturday Night Live, I met him, and he did a set. And then I met Scott Thompson from The Kids in the Hall, a couple other friends that I, keep now. There was also this TV writer who's been, a writer for 10 years who I still adore. He is so nice, and we still keep in touch. I met him there. A couple writers from Kimmel and Conan. This girl who's on Last Man Standing, and all these other people that have, well, I guess what you would consider made it, that went and did their shows at the Ruby, because it was a great place to test stuff out, and it was free form and open stuff, and all different types of comedy I got introduced to, and different types of improv and acting. Ptolemy Smith from Westworld has an acting class there, and he's the sweetest. So I got to meet them, and it's a really, really awesome community, and I'm so glad I had that just starting to move to LA, because it didn't seem as scary. But that was super cool how Tampa Talk literally led to me having an internship, which led to me being able to move from, the small town that I grew up in Maryland to LA, and it was because of them. I had a lot to say on that. Above that was the fertility. Yeah, my keg. Oh my gosh. Okay, so this woman is a delight. Christina. She is she's based in San Francisco, and she has, where we were talking about period technology, she has literally, and she's still doing the project in San Fran, but she's developed a keg. So it's a Kegel device where it's inserted through the vaginal canal, but it also, inside of it, has devices that connect to an app on your phone, which track fertility and wellness, and takes your temperature and all this stuff. And it's also a sex toy. And I was like, whoa, this is so cool. I've never heard of something like this. And, she talked about just the struggles of trying to financially back this thing.
So I think my horror story from last period is that every time I'm just about to get my period, 1 or 2 days before, I'm really angry. Everything can piss me off. Everything, really. Parking, everything. Someone tells me something and I'm already pissed off. So my team, they really can tell what is happening, and I know that it's happening and I can't control it. So I was like, oh. And this has scientific basis, because women just before the ovulation, they have really high progesterone and then quick switch, and that can result in really different moods. Mm-hmm. So it's not subjective, many women have it, and you really can't do anything about it. But last period, I was so pissed, really I was I don't want to hear any more stupid question, I don't want to talk to any investors that don't know what vagina is, da-da-da-da-da. And then because I was so pissed, I was writing to one investor. I was like, yeah, you have to be in or out. I don't really care. And then he said, okay, I'm in.
Because there's, if you don't know already, you know now. But a lot of men are usually the ones that have the most money, and not a lot of men are really behind a fertility egg because they don't get it. So she was talking about that. You should follow their socials. That was the coolest thing, and it just opened this window of female technology and women using computer skills, which that's already a stigma, to affect the period stigma, which was dope. So that was the coolest thing. Oh yeah, I brought on my professor, Angie Bisco, who I just mentioned, and we talked about the Me Too movement, just in the stage world, and what Hollywood at the time, because she got really great offers for television, and then she said no, and why she said no, and there was just a lot of power with that. Yeah, just more friends I brought on, more talking segments I've done. I also brought on 2 other professors from my college, which was super cool. And Professor Cramp, who I love. Her name is Elizabeth Cramp. You can, find a lot of her, stuff online or stuff connected with the school. We talked about natural, like fertility and birth control, tactics. And she has this theory on birth control and like just its effect on creativity and like that stimulus in the mind, which was super cool. I've never heard of a theory such like that, and I really think that connects the femme in like this feminine energy to this unique type of creativity. Her theory is super interesting. You should definitely listen to that if you haven't. And the other I brought on Bonnie Curtis, which I was like, she's a professor at the college, and I was worried because I serve as a platform for everybody, right? Like, no matter what your background is or, whoever, anybody can come on. That's an open invitation. And this was the first time I had brought on someone with any kind of religious background. And, religion scares a lot of people away, as, with some of the people who are religious, or quote unquote religious, I don't blame you, like the pastors right now, they're like, you should come to church even though the coronavirus will heal you because God loves you. Like, that's all bullshit. But there are people who are really, really smart and who brought a lot of perspective. Bonnie Curtis is, she just came on and started talking about just theology, and we talked about the Me Too movement of the church and the imbalance of power. And, that was another thing too, to have like a religious person come on and say, hey, the church is, sorry, I just opened my closet. Some of the things that the people in the church are doing are wrong. That was, because you don't get a lot of that. You get a lot of people that are trying to defend, those people, and that's not right. And just after that, I had brought on Florence from the UK. She developed the first ever vagina museum. That was a big deal. I was like, that was my first international interview. She's a delight too. That museum has also struggled to get funding because people don't, want to fund that. People don't want to do that.
It's on a whim, but I actually think it's a life goal now. And I just stumbled upon what was possibly my favorite idea of my whole life. And here I am over 2 years later, doing it, and it's been so much fun. Because, it started off really flippantly, but actually the more I thought about it, I was like, we could actually do a lot of good. It's such a stigmatized part of the body, and so many people feel so much shame about it. That, by having a vagina museum, we could kind of, as a community, be like, actually, this isn't something we should be ashamed of. This is something we should be celebrating and talking about, telling the stories of. And, the vagina museum just suddenly became so much bigger than this initial random tweet.
But that was super cool to talk about, someone trying to develop this from an educational standpoint and how that's affected the museum community. Check that one out too. You really should check out all these, but I have all these beautiful moments. And now I'm just looking. April Davis. What a dream. She is this mom that runs the Vagina blog. And that was something that I was never talking about, where it was like the stigma around mothers trying to talk about periods.
And so when I got pregnant with my second, I kind of had a really good idea of what to look for and what not to. And so I started checking out midwifery textbooks from the library. I read everything I could get my hands on about childbirth and everything else, because I was like, I need to know everything. And I really loved Ina May Gaskin because her whole attitude was, just because it hurts doesn't mean you don't have a good time. And she was one of the first books that I read and people that I like, watch a lot of videos and things with her, where she was so willing to say, oh no, yeah, it hurts, but that doesn't mean it has to be terrible. It doesn't mean that it's not productive. And I needed someone to say that. You get into hypnobabies and stuff, and they're like, if you just do this special hypnosis, it doesn't hurt at all. That's a lie.
Her blog is awesome. You know, and it's like, it's okay for moms to talk about being horny and like moms talking about sexuality, and I was like, I am down. But she's super open about that, and I loved doing that episode. Yeah. A couple other great highlights, you know, from just friends and stuff. There's 2 more I want to talk about, and then I'm done. Because you already hear me talking every episode, but, you know, let me just give these last 2. So, it was in August when it was posted. I recorded in July. This was when I was doing my internship at the Ruby, and I was already, you know, working on TV shows. I was on This Is Us, and I think I did Hollywood, a couple of other shows. I interviewed this woman named Raina from my hometown, and she went to jail, came out of jail, and we talked about periods in prison. This was something I wanted to do for a long time, because I had talked to this lawyer who took on a lot of cases in California of people mistreating women in jail and leveraging period products for favors, or like saying, you know, you know, how hard it is to get period products in jail. And I was like, no one is talking about this. Not even in the period community. Like, no one is talking about periods in jail, and I want to do it.
Napkins would have come in a bag. They would have come in a bag.
Yeah.
They had already been sealed. So it wasn't even like the churches would be bringing in an item that they had already put something in there, or that they could have put something in there.
Right.
Because honestly, the bags, the packs of sanitary napkins could have been looked at. Okay, there's nothing, no way that something else was put in here. This can go. And if there was a hole in the bag, I would have understood why they couldn't have accepted.
Yeah. I mean, I assume it would be the same case with like a homeless shelter, for example, just for it to be, you know, clean. But for them to say that they can't take it, or that for you to hear that the state doesn't have any more or something like that, is just, to me, it makes me question like what was really happening and why were they saying that.
But finding a contact for that is really hard. So I was like asking around, just people I knew, and, you know, my mom works with a lot of people in the recovery community, and she knows Raina. So I was like, hello. I need, you know, how many people do I know in my life that have, you know, been incarcerated that want to talk about their period? And here was this woman that just stepped into my life. You know, she's an older woman, went to jail as an older woman, and talked to me about what prisons were like in Maryland specifically. But, you know, just that was so eye-opening for me. And that, you know, for people to have such disrespect, and the people that work in the jails that, like, you know, are obviously dealing with stuff because there's state shortages, but just people that were abusing their power. That was a really powerful episode, I think, to sit with her. And then recently, I got to sit down with Mayoshi, who is from Hate the Dot. And that's in New York. And she... Oh, Odin, you're stepping on my computer. Go ahead. Mayoshi was, and still is, awesome. I mean, African-American female CEO of her own company in New York, you know, doing a lot of great good for, you know, the homeless community, and just, you know, the community trying to develop this subscription service, based around periods and stuff. And just gave some awesome perspective about the relationship with her dad, and like how cool he is and sounds because of how awesome, you know, he cares about her period and all this stuff. Like, super cool.
My thing that I go back to every single time is the more you know. And so, you know, we go to these organizations and we speak to everyone. We speak to men and women, and a lot of people are saying, wow, I just had no idea that this was going on right under my nose here in New York City, or just in general. And last year, I don't know if you knew, but last year we were part of National Period Day, which was on October 19th, and we were one of the co-hosts for the New York City rally, and we led that
at City Hall along with the parade organization. And, you know, people, I was able to do a speech and, you know, talk to people afterwards. And so many people, you know, time and time again, they said, I just didn't know that this was going on. So it was all about awareness and just spreading that awareness. And
Loved that episode. You should check her out. She's, you know, still working on the company. You know, her socials are great. Check her out. Loved this. But yeah. Tampon Talk isn't, you know, it's does a lot of things for me. It's something that makes me really happy and something happy to do. And if no one listened to it, I'd still want to push it out. But it's because of people like you that have sat through this and listened to this and want to come back every time that make this so special for me and everybody that, you know, just wants to be involved in this conversation. And I'm so grateful to have this in my life, and that there's people that want to support it and people that push me to do it, and those are people don't get that. It's rare. So I mean, thank you. I can be better. You know, you've stuck through all of my crappy production value, all my other crap, because I think at the core you care. And as I'm getting older, there are more and more people in my life that just don't care anymore. And, you know, my friendship circle it's kind of like shrinking from and growing at the same time. You know, the circle of people who really care about you, like that, you know, are ride or die, get smaller as you get older. And that's hard. Well, first, it's hard to, you know, one, have that realization, and then two, actively deal with that. But things are changing. But I'm so happy that Tampon Talk is something that I have that changes in the best way and continues to grow, and people continue to support it, and, you know, new people come into my life that, you know, have this effect on me or just make the show so special. So when I say thank you for listening and thank you for being a part of this, I mean it. This is, you know, it's been huge for me. Oh, damn. My cat, my God. Oh, my God. So, thank you. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for telling your friends. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for, you know, coming to me with your ideas about, you know, about the show. Thank you, because this is for all of us. This isn't just for me. You know. And Tampon Talk has been my confessional. Just, it's my raw truth. It's, you know, everything that is going on in my life. It's, you know, it's open dialogue. It's, you know, transparent. And I think that's a model for what my life should continue to be. You know, I want to be a open book and an open door, and, you know, open-minded. And I think that's what, you know, this continues to be. You know, I was so worried about doing this and, like, you know, worried about just, you know, sitting here and talking to myself for an hour. I didn't do a tampon terror. I'm sorry. So, period of quarantine, the fucking worst. I had so much stress leading up to my period of just, you know, a pandemic, losing all my jobs, having no major source of income and, you know, having to pay rent at the end of the month, that my period sucked ass. It's cramps. I was in my bed every day just from dusk to dawn cramping. And it was so much blood. So much blood. It was so gross. It was like, I get a few clumps, you know, that are quarter size in my period sometimes. I had so many this time, y'all. It was dumb. Like, I was like, where are these all I had periods for multiple people just in my uterus, just Jay chillin'. It was and I was in the bathroom, and my cat doesn't like me to be in the bathroom alone. He wants to be in the bathroom but sitting on my lap, and I had, you know, had everything down because I was changing, you know, a tampon or a pad or whatever it was, and he barged in. Oh, I was a tampon. And he came in, and I took the tampon out, and he swatted at it and then knocked it on the floor. And I was like, no. Like, it was so gross. And I was like, I'm so sorry. You're so innocent. I need to put this away. But, you know, I'm so glad he learned. You know, he's serving right now. It was so bad. And then I had a pad on or something later, and like he came in and he kept trying to like snip the pad, and like, you know, I was like, knock it off. I don't know why he liked it. But yeah, he loves to sit in the bathroom and cuddle on my lap. And now he's just sitting outside the closet where I'm recording because I'm not paying attention to him. But yeah, that was my story. God damn. Thank you for being you. And despite the coronavirus and despite this pandemic, keep on bleeding. We're gonna get through this. It's gonna be okay. And thank you for listening to Tampon Talk with me. We'll see you next time.
I've been on mountains, I've been on lakes, been out on the ocean, now on the States. But it ain't so pretty when you're all alone. The only friends I got are stuck inside my phone.